Today we're going to talk about reproduction in organisms. So there are two types of reproduction. One is asexual and the other is sexual reproduction. So asexual reproduction, the letter A in front of this word means not. So it's one organism that produces one or more new organisms that are identical to itself. So it's not sexual reproduction, it's asexual. Most single-celled organisms and some multicellular organisms reproduce this way. And how does this happen? Well, there are four main ways. So if you're taking notes, I would make 4 sections in my notes under asexual reproduction. The first way is called binary fission. The second is budding. The third is by spores. And the fourth is called vegetative reproduction. So how does this all take place? Let's start with binary fission. Binary fission splits into 2 identical organisms. This is only found in organisms that don't have a nucleus. Those are called prokaryotes. In binary fission, you get 2 of the same things. They're identical. Budding occurs when a bud grows on a full-size organism. The size, shape, the same characteristics as the parent organism. You've seen this happen in potatoes. They're called eyes. I don't know, maybe they look like an eye extending. I'm not sure why it's called that, but it's a bud. Also on an onion, you'll get a sprout coming out of the top of an onion sometimes. If they sit in a dark, cool place for a while, they'll begin budding too. The third was spores, and spores can survive in harsh conditions. They're amazing. Think of a mushroom here. They're lightweight, they can be carried by the wind, and there are tons of them that can be spread. And lastly, we have vegetative reproduction. This is when something develops from special stems or buds or plantlets. It often happens in plants. So what are the advantages? There are some real advantages to being able to reproduce asexually. You can produce a lot of organisms very quickly. So something that can undergo asexual reproduction can get many organisms very fast. And if you remember what are the most important things to any living thing on the most basic level, it's to be able to grow and to reproduce. Grow and reproduce. So if you can reproduce in such a way that you can have a lot of offspring very quickly, that would be extremely advantageous. It also ensures that favorable traits are passed on to the offspring. So if you have a good specimen and it buds, you get another really good specimen. Reproduction can occur without a partner. So there's none of this going to find a mate. Can happen just with themselves and quickly. Also, all the offspring can reproduce. So there aren't some that can and some that can't. All right, so let's look at the second main type of reproduction. So that was asexual reproduction. This is sexual reproduction. In sexual reproduction, we have females that make egg cells and male organisms that make sperm cells. And together, when a fertilization occurs when an egg and a sperm join together, and that is the key to sexual reproduction. You get a fertilized egg that develops into a new organism. There are some real benefits to this as well. Most multicellular organisms reproduce sexually. Multicellular meaning more than one cell. So anything past an amoeba will often do. Even flowers, if you think about bees pollinating, that's happening that way too. 2 parents can contribute to a sex cell contribute one sex cell to the new organism. So remember we talked about this in meiosis. Half the genes in the offspring come from each parent. So you have a total of 46 chromosomes, any living thing that would reproduce sexually, and 23 of those would come from one parent and 23 would come from the other parent. They join together in fertilization and you get your total 46. Females have sex cells that are called eggs. And all eggs possess 2 X chromosomes. We learned this as well in heredity. XX is a female. And males produce sex cells called sperm cells. And a sperm cell can either carry an X or a Y. So it is the males and the males alone who determine the sex of the child, whether they will be a boy or a girl. If a male gives the X, then it will be a female because you can only get an X from the mother. 2 X's is a female. If a male contributes a Y, then the female contributes the X and the male contributes a Y. You get a male offspring. A sperm and an egg join together in a process called fertilization. The process of an egg and sperm joining is fertilization. When an egg is fertilized by a sperm, a new cell called a zygote is formed, and it has a full set of genetic material. It will either be XX female or XY male. It undergoes cell division and becomes an embryo. So it starts as a zygote after fertilization. Then it starts to do meiosis, cell division, and becomes an embryo. So also, sperm and egg cells are formed during the reduction division, which is meiosis. So before one is fertilizing the other, the father has 46 chromosomes. In meiosis 1, breaks down to 23. In meiosis 2, now you have 4 sets of 23. In a female, they have 46, breaks down into 2, and one of them will have 23. These others are called polar bodies, and they're not functional, which is interesting in the ovum. And then the second division will give you 1 with 23, because those polar bodies are not functional. Sperm and egg cells are formed during, we did that one. Oops. Having some troubles here. The advantages of sexual reproduction is that it increases genetic variation. So if you're a plant and you're budding, you're getting an exact copy of yourself. But if you're a plant undergoing sexual reproduction, you can have some genetic variation. Like those flowers we saw, one was red, one was white. When they cross over, they're pink. There's your variation. Offspring have different traits. That improves the chances that at least some of them will survive. So if you're budding and you're making the exact same thing and you can't survive the harsh conditions that you're in, then none of your offspring will survive those conditions either. It's likely. All right, let's look at the two together, asexual versus sexual. Some organisms can actually do both types, and this allows them to spread very quickly. And they can adapt to their changes in an environment really quickly. So 2 examples I have here are starfish and earthworms. Both can choose either sexual or asexual reproduction, and it depends on the environment. So if there's a mate around, they'll likely choose sexual reproduction for the fact of what we just said. Increases variability, the higher likelihood of survival if conditions are difficult. If there's not a mate around, they can still grow and reproduce. Remember, that's their main goals, and not have to worry about wasting energy to look for a mate. In sexual reproduction, offspring receive traits from both parents, and in asexual, you just get the same exact copy, which can be good if it's good in its environment, but can be bad if it's not ideal for its conditions that it's living in. All right, quick review. How many ways can organisms reproduce asexually? 1, 2, 3, or 4? Pause the video and make a choice. The answer is 4. Remember, we had binary fission, budding, spores, and vegetative reproduction. How many parents are needed for sexual reproduction? 1, 2, 3, or 4? Pause the video, make your choice. The answer is 2. A benefit of asexual reproduction is that it is slow or fast. Pause the video. Fast. Sexual reproduction does not increase genetic variation. Is this true or false? Pause and see. Make your choice. False, that's actually the point of it, that it does increase genetic variation, so that there's a greater likelihood that offspring will survive if the conditions are not exactly right, or even if they are. Male and female sex cells join during asexual reproduction, fertilization, meiosis. Make your choice. Oops, sorry, mitosis is on there. The answer is fertilization. And that is the end of our show today. So our notes. So if you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Listen to the notes again. Pause me if I went too fast. Rewind, hear it again. And do reach out if you have questions.